As the year 2014 approached, I was aware that the centenary of the First World War was approaching as well. And I believed from the very beginning that this centenary should produce monumental works of art that can be performed or viewed or read in another 100 years' time. And I kind of set myself a mission then to write a full-scale work in memory of all those who gave their lives during the First World War. And this evolved into the Great War Symphony. A symphony because Mahler said the symphony is a world. And I thought, if I'm going to write a piece of music, a serious, substantial piece of music about the First World War, the symphony, I think, is the musical genre that can hold it. I was also aware that the four movements of the traditional symphony lend themselves perfectly to the 4 years of the First World War. And that's what it's all about. The first movement is a reflection on the middle of 1914 to the middle of 1915, and so on. I'd spent, can you believe, about 18 months researching the texts I was going to use. I kind of hid myself away and thought, look, if I'm going to be writing what I hope is going to be a major work of memorial to these men who gave their lives, I need to do it properly and seriously and know what I'm on about. And once I had compiled the text that I wanted to use, I began work. I suppose it took me about 8 months to write. I realised that I could call the first movement Preludium, the second movement March, the third movement Elegy, because the third year of the war was very still, stagnant. Very little progress was made either by the Germans or the Allies. And so I thought that lent itself to a movement of greater reflection.
This is the grave of my great uncle Harry, 3472 Lance Corporal H. Hawes, Lincolnshire Regiment, died the 14th of October 1916. But the most amazing thing is this inscription. He lies with England's heroes in the watchful care of God. And I'm struck by how poetic it is, especially compared to some of the other inscriptions. Many of the stones don't have any sort of inscription like that. And all of a sudden I'm struck with the fact that I could use these words in the Great War Symphony. They'd be perfect for my elegy, the third movement, which takes as its basis August 1916 to August 1917, and this just fits perfectly in that time frame. This great poetic phrase, and of course my personal connection with the First World War.
And then the finale, which of course examines how the war could have gone either way. It was a stalemate. I begin that movement with the setting of the Dies Irae, this kind of moment of truth. Which way is it going to go? You know, will the soul descend to hell or will it rise to heaven? The great British poet and novelist Thomas Hardy wrote a poem on the day of the armistice, 11th of November. And within it, I set just a sentence. It's so beautiful. It's a turning point. Calm fell. And heaven distilled a clemency. Fantastic words. Yeah, there was peace on earth and silence in the sky. That comes towards the end of the symphony. I end the symphony itself with an American poem, a female American poet, Moyna Michael, called We Shall Keep the Faith. Beautiful poem. It's the first time, actually, the poppy is ever mentioned as an emblem of remembrance. It was premiered in the Royal Albert Hall in October 2018, which was probably the most fulfilling experience of my life, to a packed audience. Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, the National Youth Choirs of Great Britain, the fantastic soprano, who I believe will emerge as one of the greatest of our generation, Louise Alder, and Joshua Ellicott sang tenor. One thing I learnt writing the Great War Symphony is if you're going to be writing a piece of music about a particular period or of a particular period, I think it's very important you do all you can to gain an affinity with that period. But writing the Great War Symphony, I found myself listening to a lot of Vaughan Williams and also Elgar, music that was thoroughly of that time and of that country, of my country, England. I didn't want to write with the Great War Symphony a work where the musical language was foreign to the period I was writing about. And I think that's an important lesson for young composers. Because you're not always going to be writing about the present or the future. You know, often as creative people, we want to reach back and be a little bit nostalgic. And I think one's therefore got to put oneself in the position, in context of that particular period.